December 16, 1944. 0530 hours. A concrete bunker beneath the Eifel Hills, 12 miles east of Elsenborn Ridge. SS Oberstgruppenführer Josef Dietrich studied the artillery deployment maps spread across his planning table, the flickering candlelight casting shadows across positions his Sixth Panzer Army would soon overrun. The commander of Hitler's elite armored force, a former butcher's apprentice who had risen to command the most powerful striking force Germany could assemble, dismissed the American artillery concentrations marked in blue pencil with a contemptuous wave. "The Americans rely on quantity over precision," he remarked to his chief of staff. "Their artillery is slow, methodical. By the time they coordinate a response, our panzers will be drinking champagne in Antwerp." Dietrich's assessment was not unreasonable, given available intelligence. German doctrine emphasized precision over speed, with carefully observed fire adjusted round by round until shells found their targets. The process required patience and skill. Reports from North Africa and Normandy suggested American gunners followed similar procedures. What Dietrich could not have known, what German intelligence had catastrophically failed to grasp, was that American artillerists had abandoned the old methods entirely. At Fort Sill, Oklahoma, a revolution in fire direction had been quietly perfected over the previous decade. Major Carlos Brewer and Major Orlando Ward had developed something unprecedented, a centralized fire direction center that could mass the fire of dozens, even hundreds of guns onto a single target in minutes rather than hours. The mathematics that German officers assumed would protect their advancing columns had already been solved. The equations were loaded into American firing charts, waiting to be unleashed. Within 72 hours of Dietrich's confident assessment, his elite 6th SS Panzer Army would slam into a wall of steel at Elsenborn Ridge. The guns he dismissed would fire over 10,000 rounds in a single day. His vaunted Panzer Grenadiers, some of them teenagers from the Hitler Youth Divisions, would be described by American patrols as lying dead in the snow, as common as grass. The 3-minute miracle had arrived. The transformation of American artillery began in the years between the wars, when budget constraints forced innovation over procurement. At the Field Artillery School at Fort Sill, a small group of officers recognized that the Great War's methods, where batteries operated independently and fire was adjusted through time-consuming observation, could not survive the pace of modern warfare. Major Carlos Brewer, director of the Gunnery Department in the late 1920s and early 30s, introduced revolutionary fire direction techniques that made support more responsive. His successor, Major Orlando Ward, went further. He developed the Fire Direction Center concept, centralizing command and control to facilitate massing fire from multiple batteries simultaneously. The breakthrough came in 1931 when the Gunnery Department successfully demonstrated massing battalion fire using a new method. Instead of each battery commander independently calculating firing data and adjusting through observation, a central fire direction center used precise survey data, meteorological corrections, and pre-calculated firing tables to generate accurate solutions for multiple batteries simultaneously. German artillery doctrine operated on different principles. The Wehrmacht relied heavily on survey and maps at battalion level. Artillerists calculated firing tables daily after receiving meteorological messages. They used mechanical calculators to compute data. The process was thorough and methodical, producing accurate fire when given sufficient time. But time was the variable the Germans could not control. What German intelligence failed to understand was the American system's speed. A fire support call could produce shells on target in as little as 3 minutes. Forward observers transmitted grid coordinates. The Fire Direction Center plotted the target on firing charts, calculated range and elevation corrections for weather and ammunition characteristics, and transmitted firing data to every battery in range. The batteries could fire without ever seeing the target themselves. The sophistication extended further. American gunners had developed a capability the Germans lacked entirely, the time-on-target mission. In a standard artillery barrage, shells from different batteries arrive sequentially, allowing defenders precious seconds to seek cover after the first round's impact. Time on target eliminated this window. The Fire Direction Center broadcast a countdown to all participating batteries. Each calculated the time of flight from their position to the target. Each fired at a calculated moment so that the initial rounds from every gun, sometimes dozens of batteries firing simultaneously, arrived at the target within a 3-second window. The effect was described by German prisoners as having no defense. One moment, silence. The next, a hurricane of steel that allowed no reaction, no cover, no survival in the open. The American armies fighting in Europe would perfect this technique to a degree that astonished friend and enemy alike. The M2A1 105mm howitzer formed the backbone of American divisional artillery. Each infantry division fielded 36 of these weapons, organized into 3 battalions of 12 guns each. The howitzer weighed approximately 5,000 pounds and could be towed by standard 2.5-ton trucks or high-speed tractors at road speeds impossible for the horse-drawn German artillery still common in the Wehrmacht. The 105mm shell weighed 33 pounds and could reach targets at 12,300 yards, approximately 7 miles. A well-trained crew could sustain 3 rounds per minute indefinitely, or achieve bursts of 10 rounds per minute for short periods. 1 out of every 5 shells fired by American forces in World War II was a 105mm high explosive round from these howitzers. Supporting the divisional artillery were corps-level assets, including battalions of M1 155mm howitzers with ranges exceeding 14,000 meters, and the massive 8-inch and 240mm pieces that could reduce fortifications to rubble. The American system allowed these disparate weapons to be coordinated through a single fire direction network, massing fires from guns miles apart onto targets identified by any observer in the network. German artillery, while excellently designed, suffered from systemic disadvantages. Much of the Wehrmacht's artillery remained horse-drawn until 1943, when attempts at motorization were hampered by fuel shortages and industrial limitations. The famous 88mm gun, devastating in direct fire against tanks and aircraft, was less effective as indirect artillery due to its flat trajectory. More critically, German units lacked the standardized fire direction procedures that allowed American batteries to mass fires rapidly. What German commanders did not realize about American artillery in December 1944 would cost them the Ardennes offensive. The equation had been calculated. The answer awaited only the question. The first indication that something had changed came at 0525 on December 16, when German artillery opened the Battle of the Bulge with a 90-minute barrage from 1,600 guns along an 80-mile front. The bombardment was impressive. It cut communications, disrupted supply lines, and sent inexperienced American troops scrambling for cover. But on the northern shoulder of the offensive, where Dietrich's Sixth Panzer Army advanced toward the critical road network west of Elsenborn Ridge, the German attacks ran into unexpected resistance. The 99th Infantry Division, green troops who had never experienced combat, held positions that the Germans had expected to overrun in hours. The Wehrmacht's plan called for capturing the ridge by the second day to secure routes toward the Meuse River and ultimately Antwerp. At Elsenborn Ridge, 4 American divisions would eventually be supported by the fire of 348 guns and a battalion of 4.2-inch mortars. All of these weapons were placed under the direction of the assistant division commander of the 1st Infantry Division. All their fire was coordinated through his headquarters. This concentration of artillery, managed through the Fire Direction Center system developed at Fort Sill, created a killing ground that German forces could not penetrate. The turning point for Dietrich's offensive came on December 17, when elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division, the Hitler Youth Division that had already amassed a record of bravery and brutality in Normandy, attempted to push through the twin villages of Rocherath and Krinkelt. The attack began with effective combined arms tactics. German tanks and infantry coordinated well. Panther tanks penetrated American lines. For hours, the battle hung in the balance as house-to-house fighting raged through the streets. Then American artillery found its voice. Captain Walter Jensen, a forward observer with the 2nd Infantry Division, had established an observation post overlooking the German assembly area east of the villages. Through his field glasses, he could see Panzer Grenadiers forming up for another assault, supported by at least a company of tanks. He reached for his radio. The fire mission request traveled through the Battalion Fire Direction Center, then to Division Artillery, then to Corps. Within minutes, batteries miles behind the front were swinging their tubes toward calculated azimuths. The time to target was broadcast. Lanyards were readied. The German formation never completed its assembly. 12 battalions of American artillery responded to the call. The first rounds arrived simultaneously, a time-on-target mission that put hundreds of shells into the assembly area in the space of 3 seconds. Soldiers who survived described the experience as being caught in a sudden, impossible storm. There was no warning whistle, no time to react. One instant, the cold morning was quiet. The next, the world exploded. The assault was canceled. The Germans who could still move withdrew. Those who could not lay where they fell, their blood melting holes in the December snow. What German commanders discovered at Elsenborn Ridge was that American artillery responded faster, hit harder, and covered more ground than anything in their experience. The Fire Direction Center system allowed observers anywhere on the front to call fires from any battery in range. A single forward observer could theoretically direct the combined firepower of an entire corps artillery, dozens of battalions comprising hundreds of guns, onto a single target. The mathematics were devastating. A standard time-on-target mission from 4 batteries, 24 guns of mixed calibers, might put 120 shells into a target area the size of a football field in 3 seconds. Some rounds were fused for ground burst to destroy vehicles and fortifications. Others were set for airburst to spray shrapnel across troops in the open. December 19 brought a new horror to German forces in the Ardennes. Unknown to them, the embargo on a secret American weapon had been lifted just hours earlier. Colonel Oscar Axelson, commander of the 406th Artillery Group supporting the defenders at Monschau, had received shells equipped with proximity fuses. These variable time fuses contained miniature radar sets that detected the ground and detonated the shell at a preset height, typically 30 to 50 feet above the surface. Traditional time fuses required observers to estimate burst heights, a process prone to error. A shell that burst too high dispersed its shrapnel uselessly. A shell that burst too low buried much of its energy in the ground. The proximity fuse eliminated these problems. Every round detonated at optimal height, every time, regardless of weather or terrain. General Dwight Eisenhower had demanded permission to use the new fuses, despite security concerns about German capture and reverse engineering. The emergency of the Bulge overcame bureaucratic resistance. By Christmas Day, proximity-fused rounds were being fired across the Ardennes. General George Patton reported the results to the War Department. The night of December 25 and 26, we had used the new proximity fuse on a number of Germans near Echternach and actually killed 700 of them. The new shell with the funny fuse is devastating, Patton wrote. I think that when all armies get this shell, we will have to devise some new method of warfare. At Elsenborn Ridge, the proximity fuse amplified the already overwhelming American artillery advantage. German prisoners captured in late December spoke of attacks that came without warning from above, of comrades killed by invisible forces, of formations that simply ceased to exist under shell fire that seemed to know exactly where they stood. By December 20, the Americans had established a virtually unassailable position on the ridge. The experienced 9th Division had arrived from Aachen and taken positions on the northern flank. The 2nd and 99th Divisions held the center. The 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, formed the southern flank, stretching toward the village of Butgenbach. The German High Command demanded results. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt and Field Marshal Walter Model ordered repeated assaults on the American positions. Hitler himself insisted that Elsenborn Ridge be captured to open routes for the Sixth Panzer Army. Division after division was fed into the attacks. On December 21, the 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division attempted an assault but was hit by artillery while still forming up. The attack was cancelled before it began. Later that day, elements of the 12th SS Panzer Regiment and 25th Panzer Grenadier Regiment attacked American positions at Dom-Butgenbach. The battle raged throughout the day. Many American survivors of the attacks at Dom-Butgenbach owed their lives to the divisional artillery of the Big Red One. The artillerymen supporting the riflemen on the line fired an astounding 10,000 rounds against the German attacks on December 22 alone. Such was the ferocity of the artillery fire that while several German tanks broke the lines, not a single Panzer Grenadier managed to make his way close to the American defensive foxholes. The German dead, many of them as young as 15 and 16 years old from the Hitler Youth Divisions, were described by American patrols as lying in the snow as common as grass. American Graves registration counted 782 German dead in front of the 26th Infantry Regiment's positions alone. On December 26, the 246th Volksgrenadier Division made a final desperate attack on Elsenborn Ridge against units of the 99th Infantry Division. The assault by infantry conscripts was mowed down by artillery fire virtually at the moment of its start. The vast artillery concentration of an entire American Army Corps made the Elsenborn Ridge position virtually unassailable. The German High Command called Elsenborn the doorpost of the northern shoulder. They could not open it. The shortest route to Antwerp, the route assigned to Hitler's elite SS formations, remained blocked. The entire 6th Panzer Army, the force that Dietrich had confidently promised would drink champagne in Antwerp, ground itself to destruction against American artillery fire. At sunrise on December 27, Dietrich and his 6th Panzer Army faced a grim reality east of Elsenborn Ridge. The 12th SS Panzer Division, 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division, and supporting Volksgrenadier divisions had beaten themselves into uselessness against the heavily fortified American positions. They could advance no further. The strategic impact extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. Because American forces held the northern shoulder, German mobile units backed up behind the stalled front. Kampfgruppe Piper, the armored spearhead of the 1st SS Panzer Division that had penetrated deepest into American lines, could not be reinforced or resupplied. The Malmedy route remained blocked. Roads that German planners had assumed would carry victory became traffic jams of frustrated armor with nowhere to go. The 9th Air Force, primarily equipped with fighter bombers, flew over 213,000 combat sorties during the campaign, but during the critical first week, weather grounded most aircraft. American artillery provided the firepower that air support could not. The guns never stopped for weather. They fired through snow and fog and freezing rain, guided by forward observers who could see nothing but their own frozen hands and the radio handsets that connected them to killing power beyond imagination. If you're finding these lesser-known American victories compelling, subscribing helps us uncover more stories that deserve to be told. The Americans utilized their superior communications and artillery tactics with ruthless efficiency. The ability to mass fires from distant batteries onto attacking German units created a defensive barrier that German commanders had not anticipated and could not penetrate. Attacks that began with textbook combined arms coordination ended in chaos as artillery fire destroyed command structures, killed junior leaders, and broke formations before they could close with American infantry. German intelligence reports captured after the war revealed the progressive understanding of what they faced. Early assessments dismissed American artillery as inferior in quality, if superior in quantity. By late December, the assessments had changed dramatically. Reports described American artillery as delivering overwhelming firepower with unprecedented speed and accuracy, capable of responding to calls for fire within minutes rather than the hours German procedures required. prisoner interrogations painted a picture of demoralization. Allied artillery fire caused the Germans to feel insecure along the entire front, one captured intelligence document noted. The demoralizing effect of round-the-clock shelling was characterized by helplessness, panic, and confusion in the ranks of German personnel. Personnel of all arms were paralyzed and terrorized. An anonymous German soldier's statement, captured in American intelligence files, summarized the experience from the receiving end. All the Dauphites know that without our artillery, they could not exist. The Germans fear that more than any arm of our army. The mathematics of the American artillery system had created an equation Germany could not solve. Precision without speed was useless against an enemy who could mass fires faster than formations could assemble. Courage without cover was suicide against shells that knew when to explode. The Sixth Panzer Army had encountered not just guns but a system, a method of war that rendered their tactical excellence irrelevant. While the defense of Bastogne by the 101st Airborne Division captured public imagination and press attention, military historians would later recognize that the battle for Elsenborn Ridge was actually the decisive component of the Battle of the Bulge. War correspondents had gathered in Bastogne, which had been a rest and recreation area before the offensive. Their reports dominated newspapers and radio broadcasts. There were no correspondents in Elsenborn, but the numbers told the true story. The attack on Monschau, Hofen, Krinkelt, Rockerath, and Elsenborn Ridge was led by units personally selected by Adolf Hitler. The Sixth Panzer Army had received priority for supply and equipment. It had been assigned the shortest route to the ultimate objective of Antwerp. These were the elite of the Waffen-SS, 4 panzer divisions and 5 infantry divisions in 3 corps. They failed. They failed because American artillery made their assigned route impassable. They failed because the Fire Direction Center system allowed defenders to respond faster than attackers could advance. They failed because time-on-target missions destroyed formations before they could execute their orders. Historian John S. D. Eisenhower, son of the Supreme Allied Commander, concluded that the actions of the 2nd and 99th Divisions on the northern shoulder were the most decisive of the Ardennes campaign. The organized retreat to Elsenborn Ridge and subsequent stubborn defense blocked the 6th Panzer Army's access to key roads in northern Belgium that they were relying on to reach Antwerp. It was the only sector of the American front line during the Battle of the Bulge where the Germans failed to advance. In the weeks following the battle, interrogators at Allied prisoner camps collected testimony that confirmed what the artillery had achieved. German veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes in the west, who had survived Soviet barrages in the east, spoke of American artillery with a particular kind of fear: the speed of response, the impossibility of cover, the shells that seemed to know when to explode. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, who had considered Dietrich decent but stupid, was especially critical of the 6th Panzer Army's handling in the Ardennes. But even Rundstedt acknowledged that the artillery concentration at Elsenborn had made the position unassailable. He had declared it useless to keep 5 divisions attacking there. Hitler had insisted they continue regardless. In early 1945, Dietrich himself joked bitterly about his command. "We call ourselves the 6th Panzer Army because we've only got 6 panzers left." The elite force that was to lead Germany's last offensive had been bled white against American artillery. Rommel, before his death, had noted American artillery effectiveness after experiences in North Africa. "The tactical conduct of the enemy's defense had been first class," he wrote of the Americans at Kasserine Pass. They had recovered very quickly after the first shock. What Rommel observed at Kasserine was only a preview. The fire direction system that impressed him in 1943 had been refined to devastating perfection by the time of the Bulge. German doctrine had emphasized precision and methodical adjustment. American doctrine emphasized speed and mass. In the calculus of modern war, speed won. A battery that could put accurate fire on target in 3 minutes defeated a battery that needed 30 minutes for the same task, regardless of how precise that fire might eventually become. The legacy of American artillery in World War II extended far beyond the immediate tactical results. The Fire Direction Center concept developed at Fort Sill became the foundation for artillery doctrine worldwide. The principles of centralized control, rapid response, and massed fires remain fundamental to modern combined arms warfare. The American approach proved that systems matter as much as weapons. German guns were excellent. German gunners were skilled. But German procedures could not match American procedures for speed. The bureaucracy of fire control that Fort Sill had eliminated remained embedded in German doctrine, and that bureaucracy cost lives, battles, and ultimately the war. December 16, 1944. 0530 hours. SS Oberstgruppenführer Josef Dietrich had dismissed American artillery as slow and methodical. By January 16, 1945, exactly 1 month after the offensive began, the Battle of the Bulge was officially over. The Sixth Panzer Army had been transferred to the Eastern Front, a broken force retreating from an offensive that was to have won the war. The doorpost at Elsenborn had held. 348 American guns, coordinated through a single headquarters, had stopped the main effort of Hitler's last offensive. The fire direction system perfected at Fort Sill had demonstrated what massed responsive artillery could achieve against the most elite forces Germany could assemble. German prisoners had described American artillery as having no defense. They were correct. Against shells that arrived without warning, that exploded at the perfect moment, that came from batteries the target never saw, there was no defense. There was only survival for those fortunate enough to be elsewhere when the call went out and the lanyards pulled. The German High Command had assumed that artillery required time. American artillery required only coordinates. The maps that Dietrich studied on December 16 showed positions his panzers would overrun. By December 26, those same maps showed killing grounds where the flower of the SS lay frozen in the snow. The 3-minute miracle had answered the German offensive with mathematics more devastating than courage, with systems more powerful than will, with American industrial logic applied to the ancient art of gunnery. Dietrich had laughed at American artillery. The gunners of Elsenborn Ridge had the last word. Their answer was written in steel and fire, in shells that fell like judgment on formations that believed themselves invincible, in a wall of destruction that proved American artillery was neither slow nor methodical. It was precise, it was overwhelming, and it won the battle that won the Bulge.